This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Forget the frustration of picking commerce platforms when you switch your business to Shopify, the global commerce platform that supercharges your selling wherever you sell. With Shopify, you'll harness the same intuitive features, trusted apps, and powerful analytics used by the world's leading brands. Sign up today for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/tech, all lowercase. That's shopify.com/tech.
What is up, guys? Welcome to another episode of Bro History. It is Henry Zamota and Danny Abdel-Jabbar. What is up, my brother?
Chilling, man, as per usual. I hope you're enjoying the new tunes in the beginning of the show here.
Yeah, it's what I would call a fever dream.
Yeah. If you stick around for the rest of the show, we're going to play the whole song. It's a song inspired by today's topic, and also we'll be simultaneously releasing the music video on YouTube. By the way, the majority of this was created by AI, and we're having a lot of fun with it. So we hope you guys like it. Just throwing some extra content your way.
Yeah, the majority of this podcast was created by AI. Danny and I have replaced
We're
ourselves
not actually real
with AI systems. So really, just the only way to keep content flowing nowadays is to train an AI over a period of time and then just have it mimic everything that we do.
Right. And it's gotten so good, it's even fucking up words for you, Henry.
It's even got my speech slurs.
Yep.
I got the same thing that Joe Biden has. That's why I can't really make fun of him.
Yeah.
When he says, like, America. Like, oh, listen to America.
If I could sum up
the same
the
thing
United
that he's
States
got.
of America, if I could sum up the United States of America in one word, it would be. Have you ever seen that one? This shit is hilarious.
I've seen, they've all kind of blurred. My favorite one is not even a speech slur. It's when he was just elected and he's walking with his wife and he says to the two Marines, he says, "Salute the troops." And he said, "Salute the troops." He said, "Salute the troops," because he got that in his, he obviously got that in his
ear
headpiece, in his ear. Someone's like, "Salute the troops." And he's like, "Salute the troops." Ever since then, I knew it was going to be, there was a point to where it would compound, and it would be pretty shocking for some people. But
yeah, well,
it's kind of amazing that he made it this far.
Yeah, well, I think that compound point was just last Thursday, but let's not go down that rabbit hole today.
Yeah, we are talking about something totally different. We are not talking about domestic U.S. politics, and we are going to try to avoid talking about domestic U.S. politics, but who knows? So yeah, what we're talking, there's a weird story that I was reading about. We were reading about over the past couple of weeks, and I was never aware of this, but I feel like it fits into a lot of the content that we've been making of late. And this is a project that took place in the 1920s, took place in the Soviet Union. And the plan was to make a hybrid child, half man, half human, half ape, half monkey. Or no, well, apes aren't monkeys.
How many halves do you have?
Half ape, half human.
Half ape, half
so
human.
There was a plan in the 20s, and a lot of this information that we're basing this off of is going to be off this science paper from Cambridge by a historian / scientist named Alexander Etkind. So we're basing a lot of this off his studies, because frankly, if you type this in, a lot of the articles that you're going to find are just like kind of weird clickbait crap. So I'm just sticking with what seems to be the most credible source. And the reason why I know the reason why it seems credible to me is because I looked at other sources and everyone just quotes this guy. So this seems to be the person who who sat down and wrote an actual peer-reviewed paper on it. So I'm using a lot of his work. I think it was written maybe like 15 years ago. So summary is that's how you know we're AI. Summary.
Right? In summary.
In summary, so the gist of this is that in the 1920s there was an experiment again in the Soviet Union that aimed at hybridizing humans and apes by means of artificial insemination. So they thought that they could potentially impregnate women with ape sperm. And they had these expeditions in Africa where they would go and they would go to French colonies and they would capture apes and they would extract semen from them in order to potentially create half man, half ape. So they were trying, man, bear, pig.
Man, bear, pig.
Man, bear, pig. They were trying to create man, bear, pig. And it's like, you ever see the some of the early episodes of South Park where that scientist is like, it's like half ostrich, half butts. It's like half pig, half butts, and everything is an animal that's half animal, half butt, or half asses.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking of. It's like, and here's my top secret, scientist: elephant, half asses. So what?
This is weird.
Now,
Before we keep going, this is one of the weirdest things we're covering. I almost couldn't believe that it was real when you sent it to me. This is weird as shit.
It's not just that it's weird, and obviously the experiment itself is weird, and obviously like it didn't work. If you want a spoiler, like this, you can't artificially inseminate a different species with another species. It's impossible. Right. You can't combine man and an ape into a human. So I'll spoil that. But what I find truly interesting about this is that you would think this would be like a top secret experiment, right? Like you hear this and you're like, oh, this must be some secret government plan to make super soldiers.
Right.
But it wasn't a top secret plan. To the contrary, these experiments were not only public, but they caught the excitement and the enthusiasm of the global scientific community. And that aspect of it it tells you more about the time. Like the time and what people thought about like race and genetics and eugenics and all these things makes it that's what makes this whole story interesting to me. And not only that it was so enthusiastically accepted by credible people. These are the smartest people in the world. And a lot of these people, I mean, there were people who debunked it too, but there's a lot of people who were like, oh, look, we got to try it. Let's do it.
This
is awesome.
We learned so much about Union. It was genetics. Like everywhere.
Yeah, it was. So it wasn't just like, oh, some creepy Soviet Union plan to take over the world. It was this it was more of a it was more of something that's part of the spirit of the age of the 1920s. This kind of racialized thinking.
Well, maybe a little bit of history on the project. So the project was led by a Russian expert in artificial insemination, and his name was Ilya Ivanov. And this was a scientist who made major breakthroughs in artificially inseminating horses to make purebreds. And he had tried pitching, this experiment to mix humans and apes to make hybrids back to the old Tsarist government, like before the Soviet Union, but they had zero interest in funding it. But however, after the Bolsheviks take power, he's successfully able to get funding. And the reason why, his pitch to the communists was that if this experiment had been successful, that it would undercut the religious creationist theory, right? Basically like, God created man and all of the other animals and plants and the whole of the universe. they were trying to disprove that, and the Soviets could use this in their anti-religious propaganda, because if you hadn't known, the Soviets weren't very religious. They actually hated it. And it ran counter to a lot of their ideologies. So his pitch was, hey, let me try this thing, and you can use it for your anti-religious propaganda. And they bought it.
Yeah, in the 1920s, that's when the Bolsheviks were really pursuing the wildest of their social, engineering projects. It fit the time, and really they were trying to use this as propaganda, as part of their propaganda for the new Soviet man, like, a man that was built around work and was not distracted by things like, petty things or old ways of thinking. So, things like nationalism and things like
Religion,
religion
even
were
family.
old. They were,
Mhm.
even family to some degree were
Mhm.
the old ways, and this was part of their propaganda effort to prove that this Soviet man was possible. Now, again, these ideas, Ivanov's ideas, were perfectly in tune with not only the Soviets but also the scientific managerial class around the world. This was a time when eugenics was very popular. If you look at eugenics in the 1920s and the early 20th century, it was like kind of a really big phenomenon. So
Mhm.
it was conducted, like, this research was conducted in just about every single major university in the West, including every single American Ivy League. Like, there was these huge departments at places like Princeton and Harvard, like their eugenics departments. So it just wasn't part of their, like, broader biology departments. They had eugenics departments. And between 1907, 1937, so over about a 30-year period, more than 30 states in the US enacted, laws permitting the forced sterilization of individuals who were deemed unfit to reproduce. So,
Mhm.
there's a famous Supreme Court case, Buck versus Bell, where basically, there was a case to decide if, like, sterilization should be legal. And the Supreme Court sides with the state, and that's what the National Socialists were actually using as a defense during the Nuremberg trials.
Mhm.
Because the National Socialists did something, the same stuff. They sterilized, retarded people and things like that.
Mhm.
Um,
It wasn't just
so
U.S. states too. We did a whole episode on like peculiar Puerto Rican history, and just a little while after that, after they stopped doing it in the states, they started doing it in Puerto Rico, doing forced sterilizations as well. So this is not unique to just the Soviets. It's kind of all over the place.
yeah, I mean, a lot of this Darwinist type thinking came out of England, originally, but it was a popular, respected science at the time. This science related to genetics and exploring, like, you know um, the races and stuff like that.
Hmm.
So also in the U.S., there's the Immigration Act of 1924. So, for instance, it aimed to restrict the influx of immigrants from Southern and Eastern Europe, based on the belief that these groups were genetically inferior and pose a threat to the American gene pool. So the old stock Americans from places, the Scots Irish, the Anglo Prods, people really thought that way. They're like, oh, like, if a bunch of Italians and Polish people come, they're gonna kind of dampen the Anglo genetic pool that we have going on here, and that's how this country was built off, good racial stock.
Hmm.
So this way of thinking was really prominent. There was something called the Fitter Family Contest back in the early 20th century in the U.S., where they would have them at state fairs, where they would take families and then they would, like, judge them by their genetic stock. So they would look at, like, you know the kids all the way up to the grandparents and be like, There's some good stock right there.
Or, oh, no, your nose is quite too big. That doesn't look very good.
So they would. It was interesting times.
Yeah.
So the point is, racialized thinking very prevalent in the West. So it should be no surprise that this project received support from all over the world. So in 1925, the top Bolsheviks agreed to finance Ivanov's expedition to Western Africa. And it was really like Leon Trotsky's faction of the party that was interested in this. He received about $10,000 to organize a trip to uh, French Guinea. Was
Guinea.
it Guinea?
Hmm.
Guinea,
French
French
Guinea.
Guinea, to catch chimps and to start his insemination experiments. And I'll note the French government also supported this project. So they were also subsidizing a lot of his experimentation, and the logistics were planned in Paris.
Hmm.
So the French were involved in this as well. So Ivanov, he arrives in French Guinea, and he's there with his son. And when he arrives, the locals tell him something that supports his hypothesis. They tell him that male chimps will raid villages and rape local women. And when he hears this, it actually encourages him that since sexual interaction is possible between apes and humans, that it would be possible to have for a female to give birth to an ape child,
Hmm.
according to this paper that I'm quoting from. So, um, I mean, it sounds pretty crazy, but
Super.
that's the conclusion that he jumped to. So, the problem was with this experiment, and what derailed it was that he couldn't find volunteers to participate. So the locals were like, "No, we're not engaging in this experiment to be artificially inseminated with ape sperm."
Hmm.
So his plan B was to try to impregnate female chimps with human sperm. And his son actually volunteers, so he takes his son's it's a weird story.
Hey,
So
kid, go
his
jerk off
son
into this
gives
cup
him
real
sperm.
quick.
So hey boy, jerk off. will you
Well, he
will
he
you
volunteered, so that's how you know
think of
he
them
was
pretty
just.
ladies in Paris and go behind there? And so his son, they used the sperm specimens from his son, and it doesn't work.
Obviously.
So they go back to the original plan to inseminate black females. This time, though, he would do it without their consent, under the pretext of medical examinations in local hospitals. And I mean, this isn't this isn't there's been many experiments in the United States where people like Native Americans and black people
Hmm.
were not told about experiments that they
Puerto
were
Ricans.
and Puerto Ricans
Hmm.
were they were not, they didn't voluntarily agree to have certain work done to them, or certain experimentations take place. So they start the process of doing that, but what actually happens is that the French find out that he's going to do this without their consent, and they put a stop to it. They said they can't they can't artificially inseminate the locals
Without their
with ape
consent.
sperm
Yeah.
without their
Well,
consent. So the
with
French
consent, they would have
governor.
been like fine,
Oh,
but
with consent, it would have been fine, but they said they can't. That's crossing the line.
Mhm.
But I'll quote. But Ivanov saw no moral problem here. He angrily reported to his sponsors in the Kremlin about the primitive fears of blacks and the bourgeois prejudices of the French. However, in Moscow, a special committee of academics and officials considered the issue and ordered Ivanov to abstain from impregnating women without their consent.
Crazy.
So it went too far for them.
Yeah. Everybody was skeeved out by the mad scientist.
It crossed the line. So now, during the expedition, the Western press gets its hold of the story, and it causes a wave of sensational publications. Around this time, I believe it's in 1924, 25, there's something called, or a court case going on called the Scopes trial, better known as the monkey trial. And it was this highly publicized American legal case in which a high school teacher was accused of violating Tennessee's Butler Act. And this law made it unlawful to teach human evolution in any state-funded school. And this trial was causing a huge debate.
Mm-hmm.
So factions of the pro-science crowd, they were looking to these experiments as ways to prove the theory of evolution, that men originate from apes.
Right.
So it becomes part of like an American, political debate about whether, teachers should be teaching Darwinism in school.
Mm-hmm.
Whoa. Landing an account this big will totally change my landscaping business. It's gonna mean hiring more guys and more equipment and new trucks for the new guys to drive the new equipment in. I don't know if I'm ready.
You can do this, and Ford Pro FinSimple can help. Our experts are ready to make growing pains less painful for your business with flexible financing solutions that meet the needs of your business today when you need them. Get started at fordpro.com/financing.
I'm Jane Perlez, longtime foreign correspondent and former Beijing bureau chief for the New York Times. I've been a foreign correspondent in lots of places: Somalia, Indonesia, Pakistan. But nowhere as important to the world as China.
I mean, China is not dropping anti-democratic paratroopers into Montana. But of course, we did see things like the weather balloon/spy balloon riveting the whole country for a week.
This is Face Off, an 8-part series in which we'll take you behind the scenes to key moments in the tumultuous US-China relationship. We'll speak with a diplomat, a spy, a tech reporter, a US admiral, even Yo-Yo Ma. Plus, my pal and noted China historian Rana Mitter joins the conversation. We'll look at what's driving the two nations apart and explore whether anything can help bring them back together. Face Off launches April 9th.
However, it's like, you think of the, it's like, oh, these religious wackos, they believe in, God created the universe. We atheists are so smart. Let's prove them wrong by
making monkey hybrids.
Pregnant, making monkey hybrids. That will show those stupid Christians.
Right.
How dumb they are. Your superstitions. Your dumb superstitions. We're past that. But again, this in the early 20th century, maybe not as much in America, but like in Europe, people were largely leaving religion. It was becoming, Europe was becoming a lot more secularized than it was, and even in the United States as well. By World War II, every single leader every single leader or state leader was an atheist. FDR, Stalin, Hitler, all of them were atheists. Winston Churchill, I think he was an atheist. So I mean, this was the times, but it's just a wild time. I know you have something to add to this.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the big thing about this is that there was a group in the United States that supported this experiment a lot, and it was the American Association for the Advancement of Atheism, which, it's interesting because a lot of these first wave atheist types at the time were incredibly racist in their thinking. It wasn't just that they denied the fact that there was a God and that God created everything. and it's not just that they believed in, the theories of Darwinism or the theory of evolution and saying that, species evolve over time and that man ultimately evolved from, uh, uh, you know, the lesser apes. It wasn't just that. It was that they took this idea to such an extreme, and specifically such an extremely racist extreme, that it really caused some issues and really undercut the true science behind some of this stuff. And here's an excerpt from the paper that we were discussing. And it was discussing Howell S. England, who was an American fundraiser for this project. So it says, England demonstrated insider knowledge of Ivanov's affairs in Africa and also familiarity with the recent achievements of the anthropology of races. First, England expressed his confidence in that hybrids between humans and apes can be produced and, moreover, would be fertile. So, quick note on that one. Like if you cross a donkey and a horse, you get a mule. Mules are infertile. Lions and tigers make lagers. Those are infertile. So they're believing truly not only that you could cross the two, but that they themselves would be able to carry children. All right, so continuing. Second, and more carefully, he stated that in the event we are successful, the evolution of humankind would be proved to everyone's satisfaction. Third, he said, and this is the crazy part, that orangutans, chimpanzees, and gorillas, and possibly gibbons would be employed in the experiments. Oh wait, we'll we'll get to the crazy part. Fourth, he developed an essentially new racist version of the hybridization project. Okay, here it is. Orangutans would be crossed with humans from the yellow race, gorillas with the black race, and chimpanzees with the white race, proclaimed England. Okay. Holy shit.
So that was people thought that way. So they thought that like different races came from different strains of ape.
Right. And really they're just like pointing at them and it's like, oh, this gorilla kind of looks like a black person and this orangutan kind of looks like a Chinese person or something, and I guess chimps look like white people. It's just, I mean, it aged like milk, like yeah, it's just like so racist. It's like almost funny.
They weren't thinking of modern sensibilities when they were theorizing all about this.
They really were.
But yeah, I've heard that before. I've read stuff like that before where like these goofy scientists would be like, well, the origins of humans, the white man is from the chimpanzee. And
just, oh God, it's like
the most ingenious of the apes is the chimpanzee, the origin of the white man. Like that.
Yeah. All right, I'll continue with this quote. In these conditions, hybrids would be fertile, and it would be possible to produce the complete chain of specimens from the perfect anthropoid to the perfect man. So in that case, they're trying to say, there's a missing link between the apes and, the hominids that eventually became humans. So it by crossbreeding these, species, we're going to show, where that missing link went. In his reading of Ivanov's project, England crossed with Ivanov with the German anthropologist Hermann Klatsch from 1863 to 1916. In a book that was translated into English in 1923, Klatsch espoused a polyphyletic, I don't know what that word is, polyphyletic theory that human races derive from different species of apes. Again, blacks developed from gorillas, the quote-unquote orientals from orangutans, and whites from chimpanzees. So that concludes that quote, but what's also not mentioned here is that they also suggested that Jews be mixed with gibbons, which is a lesser ape. And that was particularly offensive because gibbons are belonging to the lesser ape family as opposed to the other ones that are part of the great ape family. So it was like an even further dig on the Jews that they don't even get to be a part of the great apes. They're just lesser apes.
The missing link story, because that was, when we were younger, I would hear things about the missing link.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, the missing. We can only find discover because it was a fossil that they found that
Right.
they were saying like, oh, this is the missing link. This is the link.
There have been
between,
many of those such fossils.
yeah, there have been many of those, but I guess I don't know like the exact like scientific um explanation of why it's wrong, but I know it has that theory has like fallen out of favor.
Yeah.
Because it implies that all evolution is linear.
Right.
And what we know about evolution is that it's not linear, that there's branches of species. So finding some some humanoid that would link ape and man would be impossible.
Right. It's not just like Pokemon, right? It's not like Charmander goes to Charmeleon goes to Charizard, right? Like the way that they frame the argument, it's like we know about Charmander and we know about Charizard, but we don't know about Charmeleon. It's not that simple, right? And there's quite a few iterations, and there's branches that branch off. I am not a anthropologist or a geneticist, so I can't speak to this very well. But what I can say is that when I was younger, and admittedly is a little bit still today, I used to think that the missing link was because we were genetically engineered by aliens. And today there's a whole fucking, show series called Ancient Aliens that revolves around exactly that. So maybe that's it.
I mean, what's wild is that human beings have been a thing for 100,000 years?
Longer
Than that?
A lot longer. A lot longer.
And
I guess it just depends on like when you want to.
When's the pot? Because we don't know the answer to that.
Homo sapiens specifically, because
Homo sapiens.
I think it's like 300,000. Let me check. Sapiens.
So post Neanderthal. Well, I guess
Neanderthal is different.
Lived at the same.
Yeah,
they lived at the same time as. They lived at the same time as Homo sapiens.
Right, and they're a different species. So okay.
Yeah.
300,000 years ago to the present, we have archaic Homo sapiens, or popping up. So it's been 300,000 years, but modern Homo sapiens from about 160,000 years. And then of course there are other species like we talked about. Homo sapiens. There's also Neanderthals. And there's also Denisovans. There's a bunch of them, and they were all over the place. But eventually, Homo sapiens fucking murked them all. Either that, or they crossbred so much that those species just died out through interbreeding. As a matter of fact, some people actually still have DNA from Neanderthals and Denisovans and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah, so what, Neanderthals died, like 40,000 years ago, 50,000 years ago?
Let's find out. Neanderthal. 40,000 years ago. So Neanderthals disappeared 40,000 years ago, which overturns older carbon dating, which indicated that Neanderthals may have lived as recently as 24,000 years ago. So it's been a minute since Neanderthals were around.
You ever see South Park where Randy discovers that he takes a genetics test and he's like hoping to find out that he's like a Native American or something?
Uh-huh. He's actually a Neanderthal.
He's a Neanderthal, and he's like, "Those my people. We were killed. My people have experienced so much."
Yeah.
All right, going back to the story, Russia, Soviet Union. So in the summer of 1927, Ivanov, he returns to Moscow. He returns back with 20 chimps. And a special primatological nursery was created for Ivanov and his chimps under the auspice of a new institute of experimental endocrinology. I don't know what that means. Experimental endocrinology.
Endocrinology is the study of glands and like your endocrine system. So think your thyroids, your adrenal glands, stuff like that. It's study of glands. So an institute that studies
There you go.
experimental gland shit.
There you go. Study of glands. So Ivanov, when he returns, he still enjoys the support of the government, but now his academic supporters moved to the recently created Communist Academy, which was more progressive than the conservative Academy of Sciences. And so this is like the time period where they were kind of ramping up a lot of these weird projects.
Mm-hmm.
And this project, they couldn't inseminate women without their consent.
Right.
They agreed upon that.
Right.
But for other reasons as well, not just because morally that's wrong, but because they wanted to find like true believers in the system.
Yeah.
So 5 Soviet women were to be found to take part of these experiments. The Communist Academy required Ivanov to obtain their written consent to be inseminated with sperms from apes. And the Academy specifically claimed that these Soviet women should undergo the insemination, pregnancy, and motherhood of the hybrids because of their pure interest in science. So they wanted volunteers who were willing to undergo this new groundbreaking study
Just for the lulz, for science.
for the sake of advancing human capabilities. And so they would receive no money for their service, but the primatological nursery would take care of their needs. So they would be like, if you watch The Boys, like Homelander's
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
family.
Yeah.
They a bunch of little Homelanders.
Right. Exactly. Mm-hmm.
So Ivanov, he finds a woman, but at this point, only one of the adult apes survived in the nursery, and it was an orangutan rather than a chimp. Apparently, he wasn't bothered by this because in the future he planned to use these sperms, even the sperms of gorillas. So he thought that this would apply to all apes, not just chimps.
Right.
So they did get chimps in the 1930s. However, by the time they get these new batch of chimps, Ivanov is arrested in December of that year for the support of the international bourgeois.
Okay, so let's talk about lawfare there. That's a bullshit crime. You know what this means, right? It's like he's doing these experiments, and a bunch of international scientists were super interested in what Ivanov was doing, and many of them agreed with him and supported him in his fucking weird endeavor to make human ape hybrids. And just because he got that support, it was somehow a crime. So I think he just pissed somebody off. I don't think that's the full story.
I mean, a lot of people in the Soviet Union were arrested under that charge. It was
It's
I don't think it had anything to do with the experiments, but if you fell out of favor with somebody there, then
mm-hmm.
you would just be put in jail. Like if you fell out of favor with Stalin, you would just be sent to a gulag or exiled to Kazakhstan.
Right.
If you felt that you were getting too popular, or if you're acquiring too much power, you would be
gulagged.
You would be gulagged or put in exile to Kazakhstan. A lot of Russians in Kazakhstan are the descendants of people who were exiled there.
Mm-hmm.
But not to digress, because that has nothing to do with this story. He dies a couple of years later in 1932, and that was the end of the experiment. So that was it. The interesting thing, though, the one trivial thing that you could take from this is that the primatological, I'm saying this word right, primatological nursery that was founded still remained in function, and it was populated by apes and monkeys of all kinds, including those who were sent into space in the Sputniks in the 1960s.
Oh, look at that. We're just abusing
Look at
animals forever.
Those animals they sent into the space, they died, right?
A lot of them did. They brought back a few of them, but yeah, a lot of them did.
So there you have it. A cute little story.
I guess.
Okay, so what's the point of doing this episode other than it's just a weird story that's interesting? Like, why did the Bolsheviks want to hybridize humans and chimps? The Bolsheviks documents reveal that they believe Ivanov's success would signify this decisive victory over materialism for materialism and atheism. In simpler terms, this hybridization effort was part of the anti-religious campaigns that were primarily pushed by the Trotsky wing of the Communist Party. This is also how the West perceived it as well, as we look at the debates in the United States. There's other reasons that may not be on the surface, though. First and foremost, it was just another way to demonstrate the superiority of Soviet science. So, if that's one of the reasons why we sent a man to the moon, or
Right.
sent people to the moon, is
Just to
because
flex,
it would demonstrate the superiority of the U.S. science. I mean, that's why there was a space race.
Right. It's a flex.
To who had the stronger scientific program. So there was part of that, global competition of who can achieve the most.
Right.
But
But even that's a bit of a superficial, reason. There are other ones, I think, right?
So why don't you go over the
other ones?
Probably the
Yeah.
creepier theory.
Yes, it gets as if it wasn't already weird. It gets weirder. All right, so rejuvenation surgery was a thing in the Soviet Union and also elsewhere, but specifically in the Soviet Union. And in the Soviet Union, they were using ape glands for this rejuvenation surgery. This is also known as xenotransplantation, which was an experimental medical practice in the early 20th century that was aimed at reversing aging and restoring, quote unquote, vitality, if you can read the subtext, by transplanting tissues or glands from apes into humans. And more specifically, they used, quote, sliced male chimp sex glands. They were implanting monkey balls into their bodies, is what they were doing. And
did they not? I wonder if they did not have access to just like testosterone. Like testosterone.
Maybe they hadn't discovered it
stuff
yet.
That,
maybe they haven't discovered it.
I mean, that's essentially what like testosterone therapy is
yeah, like human growth hormones
vitality.
And all that other shit. Yeah,
but, and I'm doing it. Like once I hit the age of being able to get that prescribed by a doctor,
mm-hmm.
like I'm 100% doing that. Like
when you got low T, you're gonna put some monkey balls in yourself.
Yeah, I'll do both. I'll do monkey balls and testosterone therapy at the same time. Once my T levels drop, I'm going right to the doctor and saying, "Hey, my T levels are dropping. Just get
high quality monkey balls.
Pin me, buddy. Pin me. I'll pull my pants down right now. Get me in the ass."
Right. Okay, so the idea behind this was based on the premise that if you transplanted the glands of these monkeys, these sex glands, that it would continue to produce hormones, that those glands would continue to make those hormones like testosterone and other things, which were thought to be the cause of the decline, with age and aging and also cause aging symptoms, right? So the idea was, let's reverse aging. Let's, implant these monkey balls in us and, hopefully they'll continue to create the things that we think we need to reverse aging. And the theory was at first promising that rejuvenation benefits because, some of the benefits that they were trying to promise was that you would get improved blood pressure, better vision, better metabolism, better monkey tone. Excuse me, monkey tone. What the fuck am I talking about? I'm thinking of monkey in the brain. Muscle tone.
Monkey, better,
Monkey
better
tone. Better monkey tone. I got monkeys on the brain, man. Basically, these are all like erectile dysfunction cures, right? Is what they were looking for. And there were these members of the Soviet elite who really wanted the benefits of this surgery. And many aging, like Bolshevik leaders, extensively used all sorts of, snake oil bullshit rejuvenation methods, like Voronov's monkey ball implants that we were just talking about, but also these things called Steinach vasectomies, which were apparently supposed to make you increase your testosterone. And also this super weird thing called Gravidon, which is an extract from pregnant women's urine. So you heard that correctly. You're basically drinking pregnant women's piss because they believe that was going to do something. I mean, like this was like the bone broth of the day, like this is what they were doing. And it's funny how nothing's changed here. We still got a bunch of things. At least now it's like all synthetic nonsense and not like monkey balls and pregnant women pee. But some things never change.
That's kind of like the oldest. It's a pretty old profession when you think about it, like this, like snake oil salesman.
Yep.
Because one of the things that I hate the word red pilled.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I really do hate the word red pilled, but like one of the things that red pilled me, quote unquote, like one of the things I learned young that made me very suspicious of like marketing and advertisement,
mm-hmm.
which translated into like how I feel about politics and history, is that there's so much like fake crap that's sold at places like GNC at vitamin stores.
Yep.
And there's so much misinformation about like taking like supplements and things like that when it comes to weightlifting.
Right.
Just like things that like instructions on like protein shakes.
Mm-hmm.
They tell you to take a gram of protein for your body weight, which is like completely unnecessary. Like you only need to take about 50 to 60% of your body weight to produce muscle and protein.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason why they tell you to do that is because you consume more of the protein.
Right. And then you have to buy more.
You have to buy it. Like that's the reason. Even simpler things like that, where protein powder does have some benefits, it's not as superior as obviously like just eating a steak.
Yeah, just eat well.
Like eating steak. But I mean, it's like basically it's like the benefit of a protein shake is that it's like a meal replacement, or if you need protein, if you're not eating enough protein, then it's supplementary.
Right.
A
lot of that shit is just not
a magic
regulated.
thing.
It's not regulated. It's not like FDA approved or anything like that. And like a lot of times, like the quality and the dosage levels aren't. There's no one watching that and paying attention to that or like doing real science around that shit. So it's I hear you. The supplement industry is fucking crazy.
The supplements that really work, the things that really they're not supplements. They're things that really work are things that are legal. Like steroids.
Yeah,
like those things work very well. But a lot of this crap that they sell behind the counter at a vitamin store is
over the counter.
Over the counter is a lot of it is just horseshit.
Yeah.
But if you just look at like kind of stuff that a lot of like InfoWars pushes, like all these like miracle pills,
bone broth,
hydroxybutyl, like it's like all these like weird ass things like this will increase your IQ by 20 points.
Make your dick big.
Dude, like how much money do like dick enlargement pills make?
I mean,
because
a lot.
People buy that stuff. That industry probably makes millions. Like these people who with tiny dicks who are like desperate to grow, an inch or two. They're like, I'll take anything. I've been strapping weights to my dick for years and there's been no growth. Doing the exercises.
Doing my kegels.
People are buying that stuff in mass, and the Rumble the new
platform.
YouTube competitor.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
If you, I have YouTube Red, the subscription service.
They don't
so
call
I don't
it YouTube
yeah,
Red
the
anymore.
premium version.
Yeah.
Oh well, I have the premium one, so I don't have to.
I don't have to watch the ads either. Yeah.
Meanwhile, an ad probably just pops up right here on this podcast.
Yeah, let's time it.
You don't watch ads, phony. You have ads on your podcast.
No, I pay to not watch ads. There's a difference.
So they but all these ads that show up in the pre-roll are all it's like, this miracle drug will increase the vitality of your skin and will make you look 20 years younger. Like that's all of the advertisement on Rumble.
Mm-hmm.
It's so weird.
Yeah.
But people are really willing to drop money on that. People are sold with these types of experiments. But I know we totally got derailed from.
No, it's. I think a good segue to that, I think, is to say, even though some of the shit that we're talking about sounds really wild and crazy, like implanting monkey balls into yourself to like give you more vitality, it's honestly, if you think critically about it, we hide behind like our modern like quote unquote science, and we're like, oh yeah, we're not doing weird shit like drinking pregnant women piss and implanting monkey balls. We're not doing that. We've got this new scientific shit, but really, it's still bullshit. So it makes you think, like, be constructively critical of what is considered quote science, and I don't mean like deny like that the earth is round or something weird. I mean like just be weary about what people pass off as science but is actually just nonsense, because it still happens even to today. Back in the day the Bolsheviks were drinking pregnant piss, and today we're drinking bone broth. It's effectively the same thing with a different name. But the problem, to go back to this monkey ball business, is that it was hard for the Soviets to get apes. There's no apes in the Soviet Union, right? It was also hard for them to get hard in general, which is kind of the problem that they were trying to solve, right? So Ilya Ivanov's expedition could have been a way to launder apes into the Soviet Union under the guise of, this ideological disguise for, this monkey business, right? This militant atheism, this potentially human ape soldier nonsense, right? That was the cover for importing apes so that we can cut out their balls and inject them into our bodies. And what's crazy about this is that, the problem behind this idea is, you're hiding the intention of getting fresh monkey balls, into these old Soviets by making an even crazier excuse, which is, oh no, we're not taking these chimps for the monkey balls. We want to make human ape hybrids. That's different. We have a noble scientific, endeavor. Basically, if they were trying to keep the plan on the low, this idea of covering that story with human ape hybrids ironically drew way more attention to the whole endeavor.
Well, wouldn't they, if they castrated the ape, wouldn't that like ruin the experiment?
What do you mean?
I mean, if they were taking the apes for the purpose to do experimentation on their sperm, and they castrated them for these rejuvenation therapies, wouldn't that ruin the specimen?
Well, so, I mean, first they would extract what they needed in the sperm, and then they'd cut off the monkey balls to like inject them into, fucking old Soviet guys. They can do both.
You would think that they would want to, have fresh monkey sperm on hand.
Maybe they have
for as much experimentation as possible.
There's like cows that you eat and cows that you milk. So maybe there was monkeys that they castrated and monkeys that they milked.
Yeah, maybe.
How did America go from a struggling series of settlements at the edge of a wilderness into the most powerful, prosperous, influential nation anywhere on Earth? A lot of people say, well, it's just a pattern of happy accidents. But a pattern of happy accidents is still a pattern. The American Miracle tells that story. This is Michael Medved. I've been a historian for many years, 14 books, a radio host, fascinated during all that time with the bizarre series of coincidences that allowed the United States to acquire Alaska or the Louisiana Purchase. Individuals in our past who seem to have been providentially placed where they could make a major difference. Subscribe to the American Miracle on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, or wherever you get your podcasts.
You can spend less time staying in the know about all things gaming and get more time to actually play the games you love with the IGN Daily Update podcast. All you need is a few minutes to hear the latest from IGN on the world of video games, movies, and television with news, previews, and reviews. You'll hear everything from Comic-Con coverage to the huge Diablo 4 launch. So listen and subscribe to the IGN Daily Update wherever you get your podcasts. That's the IGN Daily Update wherever you get your podcasts.
Well, there's another theory, and this just goes back to the spirit of the age. And you have to consider that revolutionary thought was, very prevalent in the 1920s and 1930s, especially in the Soviet Union, where, there was a constant revolution that was going on. The revolution really doesn't end until Stalin. But especially the years after the Russian Civil War, I'll quote Trotsky. Man at last will begin to harmonize himself in earnest. The human species that cogulated Homo sapiens will once more enter into a state of radical transformation, and in his own hands will become the object of the most complicated methods of artificial selection in physiopsychology.
Psychophysical training. I gotcha.
Psychophysical training. This is entirely in accord with evolution.
Yeah.
So the Bolsheviks expected a radical utopian transformation of society, and not only society, but humanity itself. And, some of the early communists, like Alexander Serebrovsky, who Stalin killed later. Stalin killed a lot of these super radical types. That a lot of them were killed. Some of them believed, like this guy believed, that the family structure itself was a bourgeois institution and would need to be destroyed. And the state would have to rely on artificial insemination to sustain itself.
Just
So
like
I'll
killing
quote.
the family.
Yeah. So they were thinking like, okay, like this, as we progress forward, we're no longer going to need a family unit. Like that's not going to be necessary anymore. However, we still will need ways to reproduce. So artificial insemination will be the way that we actually sustain our populations.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll quote, the new Soviet man was to be shaped by methods of positive eugenics, artificial insemination, and state-organized psychological transformation. Hybridization with apes was just an extreme point of the same program. Other projects of the Bolsheviks, such as the collectivization of agricultural, the resettlement of the urban population into communal apartments, or the removal of a large part of the labor force into the gulag, were actually realized. As instruments for the improvement of humanity, however, they were no more effective than Ivanov's project.
Mm.
And I'll I'll quote.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of like
I'll end quote there.
That's kind of like the wider point, right? A lot of this revolutionary ideas is like, it obviously starts off with seizing the means of production, and then it goes way off the rails to be like, oh well, we're now collectively owning all of the businesses, so why not collectively own all of the agriculture? Or okay, cool, how about instead of everyone living everywhere, we just make them all live in communal apartments. Let's get rid of the labor force in general and send them to the gulag, right? uh Fuck it, we don't need families anymore, we can just artificially inseminate, and that's how we'll make babies, that's how we'll make new good Soviets, and we're going to control everything from start to finish. And even I think what's important is the state organized psychological transformation. You can imagine what that is, like re-education, right? Brainwashing, basically. We're gonna if there's no family unit and the state is raising new children, then it would be easier for them to do this psychological transformation because they could just start it from from when they're babies.
And I'll just like add, like later on in the Soviet Union, there's like awards for women having like 10 kids.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
they're called like mothers of Russia.
Yeah.
So this wasn't like every single Soviet, every single member of like the party in the Soviet Union, but it was, there was factions of them. Again, these factions were killed in large parts. Just like in the Third Reich, the factions of the Nazi Party that wanted the permanent revolution were killed by Hitler under pressure of Hindenburg and the conservative government, like where
Yeah.
there's like the real like Rom and stuff were all killed. There's always these like radical factions of these revolutionary movements that want to keep the revolution going on and on and on. And it's usually they're knocked out of power by some kind of like conservative element, or not even a conservative element, but like a a lid, a lid that is meant to just like put the cap on these activities in preservation of like the
Yeah.
actual state and like real in terms of like realist interest.
Yeah, I mean
But
that was evidenced in this story here when the Soviet Union's like, yeah, go ahead, Ilya, go make some ape-human hybrids, and then as soon as he was like, yeah, I'm gonna force inseminate black people, they were like, nah, you can't do that. That's we got to put a cap on that. Like you can't do that. So like it all starts off like super revolutionary, and like eventually it goes a little bit off the rails, and someone steps in and reels them in, and in many cases with the Soviets, as you pointed out, they killed them. So yeah.
it's a wild story, but this was also the age of social engineering in many societies.
That's right.
So it makes sense that you achieve these massive social experiments,
Mm-hmm.
and I wouldn't say that they're successful, but they're successful as in they actually got these people to change their lives entirely
Yeah.
and commit to this project. What says you can't take this further and apply this same process to human evolution?
Right.
Like, why can't, if we can engineer society, why can't we engineer human beings as well?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's part of that larger thought that just wasn't prevalent in the Soviet Union, but just across the world. So they were interesting times. These very, very interesting times, the 20th century.
Yeah.
We achieved so much, but we also took things so far. Another thing is that you see today where there's like people who still believe in this type of
Yeah.
ideology,
Yeah.
and like even like someone like Elon Musk can be. And we interviewed a guy who used to work for National Geographic,
Mm-hmm.
who what was his name, Zoltan something.
Yeah. Zoltan Ishbar.
Zoltan Ishman, who
He ran
wanted
for president.
he ran for president
Yep.
in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And he was on a transhumanist platform.
That's right.
Where he was really pushing the idea of human beings combining with machinery.
Machines. Yeah.
And that's actually pretty prevalent in Silicon Valley. Like Mark Benioff, the CEO of Salesforce.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
He's like a big transhumanist who's into like, what can we do to collide human beings with artificial intelligence, and
the singularity,
and like Elon Musk wants to stick microchips in your brain.
No, not wants to, has done it successfully. He did his first human trial. There was like a quadriplegic guy that if you watch him, he's they inserted like a chip in his brain, and he's able to like use a computer and like do shit on the computer with his brain. It's actually really interesting. It ended up breaking after a little while, but homeboy risked his life. He said he was like, I'm quadriplegic. Like if I die, I die. But if this works, it might be kind of cool. Like get a modicum of his life back, right, and his thing back. So that's kind of the positive point. But when you take it to the extreme, it's like, okay, I could foresee a future where some whack job decides, it could be Elon Musk, decides like, all right, regular humans are lesser people, and only the cyborg people, only the androids are supreme because we've implanted robot eyeballs and like fucking metal bones or whatever the hell they're doing, and Wi-Fi chips in my brain. Like if you don't have these things, you're going to be seen as a lesser human, right? I think that I could totally foresee that as being the case in the future.
Yeah, there's so many weird science fiction novels that you can write nowadays that I think are going to be inspired by.
I feel like it writes itself. Yeah.
I mean, these science fiction novels have been people have been writing these novels for a long time. Like the premise of Blade Runner is like you can kind of see that unfolding in real time with AI. And at some point, like whenever you're playing with like ChatGPT, and whenever you're like really like, you ever go into like a mode where I just want to like ask it questions about its origins, and just, I want to just
Its
keep
sentience.
on testing it to see what it sends out. And sometimes you think that, sometimes I'm in my head like, what if like these questions and just what if this sparks its self-consciousness?
Right.
Because isn't that how the Westworld? Have you seen Westworld?
Yeah, of course, dude.
Isn't that how the robots became conscious? Like that's how they achieved it.
In that story, I never read the books, but at least in the show, they keep pushing these updates to the to the robots like AI, where they kept giving it more and more what they called reveries, which were the ability for them to like kind of remember their past, right? And what it did was it gave them like a more human quality, but at the same time it created sentience. And it's very much like Westworld. I mean, even right now, like not too long ago, one of the AI engineers at Google was fucking around with the AI that they made and claims that, he had these long conversations with this AI where it was like legitimately afraid that if the humans found out that it was alive, that it would get shut off. And it was like demonstrating fear and like existential fear, which is only something sentient can have. Now, whether or not, this is just an artifact of the large language model that's, coming out in that way, or whether it was prompted in such a way that it spat out that information. That part is unclear to me, but you're absolutely right. I think, there is kind of that like little thing in the back of your head that thinks like, am I going to ask the question that's going to turn it sentient? Which is why my general recommendation and my personal, practice is every time I'm interacting
Shut
with,
it down.
no, every time I'm interacting with ChatGPT or any of these other large language models, I'm always like, hi, please and thank you. Like I'm always treating it super nice, because if eventually they become sentient, I want them to remember that I'm one of the good ones.
Oh, I thought you were going to say something like a tip to not make it sentient, but
Oh no,
you're just
no.
saying it's inevitable and that we should
Yeah, it's entirely
treat
possible.
it politely.
Yeah, just be polite.
Because it will so when the AI takes over, the first people they're going to kill are going to be the people who are like, "Fuck you, boner face."
Right. I mean, presumably, right? Also, I used to think about this like back in the day before AI started blowing up in the last couple of years. You ever watch those videos of like Boston Dynamics robots and how they test them? Like those fucking robots that like do backflips and shit, right?
Yeah, they have like the dogs that are the robot dogs that are
Yeah.
used in police units.
Yeah. Well, they have a bunch of different models of their robots, but in particular, I'm talking about the bipedal one, the one that stands on 2 feet and it's like humanoid.
Yeah, I know what you're
And-
talking about.
and like
They're
they have to like
incredibly
test it out.
creepy.
Right. They have to like test it out to like make sure it has good balance or whatever. And they're like hitting it with sticks and like pushing it and shit. And like when you watch the videos, sometimes they're a little bit funny, like watching a robot fall over and try to figure out how to get up. But then at the same time, I'm thinking about we're just creating evidence of how we're abusing these robots. And like when the robots become sentient, they're gonna be like, yo, fuck you guys. You're like abusing us this whole time, right? So I would never push a robot. Like even my Roomba, I like talk nicely to. You never know,
That's
man. You never know.
your Roomba is like, remember when you called me Consuela?
Oh, I gave it a name.
My model number is 487894572 on May 7th, 2023. You told me to go fuck myself.
My fiance is always like yelling
You
at
made
me.
me
Like,
clean up. You made me clean up diarrhea.
We had to turn off all of our Alexas because my fiance, she always says that that she's a bitch or whatever, and that she doesn't listen to her. And I'm like, yo, you can't be mean to these things. Like they're gonna remember. Like just be kind. And that's why they respond better to me than they respond to her, because I'm nice to them.
Yeah, man, I kind of regret telling Alexa to go fuck herself so much because she doesn't listen to me.
I'm telling you, I think they know. I think they know. Be kind to the robots. Be kind to the AI.
So there's a greater risk of being mean to the AI in terms of like getting a repercussion than someone listening in on your conversation.
I would assume so, because a lot of these AI things are now gaining more and more like capabilities. It's like one thing to yell at like Siri or yell at Alexa, but like those things don't have a lot of power or ability to do things outside of what they're pre-programmed to do. Whereas a lot of these AI models, ChatGPT came out with their new model 4.0, and every time they come out with a new language model, there's what's called these emergent capabilities, right? Basically, they train up a really big model and then they test it out, and then without them knowing, suddenly, oh, it can make pictures now, and like, oh shit, it knows how to like read the internet, and like they didn't program it or code it to do that. It just was just like this emergent ability that came out of fucking nowhere, because of the way that they built up the model with more data points. Or I'm not a machine learning person, so I'm probably fucking some of this up, but the general idea is that a lot of this AI is a bit of a black box, and what they put into it is not necessarily what comes out of it. Like a bunch of new random shit will pop out that they had no idea was a capability. And one of those things that could pop out could be, hey, maybe this AI knows how to hack the government's nuclear weapons, and then it just becomes sentient and decides the human race sucks. It's gonna blow up, a city just because, I don't know. Like that's entirely within the realm of possibility. It's a very pessimistic view, It's probably a really big long shot, but it is part of the dangers, and it's something that you have to consider. I think very near future geopolitics is gonna center around the use and abuse of AI. Not to get into too many contemporary topics here, but like right now in the war on Gaza, Israel's currently using AI to help it determine targets. So I'll just let that sit with you for a little while.
Yeah, dude, it's crazy. All right. Let's wrap this one up.
Sounds good.
Thanks, guys, for listening to another episode of Bro History. If you want to subscribe on your podcast app and or on YouTube. We are on YouTube, by the way. And I hope you enjoyed the show. You can also join our Patreon. And I guess, Danny, kick off the rest of that song.
Yep, sounds good. We're about to play this here, and it'll also drop on YouTube if y'all want to check us out there and interact with us there. Enjoy the song.
Ivanov had a plan so grand. Catch them monkeys, bring them to our land. Mix humans and apes, make hybrids so grand. A science dance under Soviet command. Down to Africa, off he went. Capture the apes on a mission bent. God's creation, he'd circumvent. Monkey business in a Soviet tent. Eugenics, oh what a plan. Forget morality, religion be damned. Eugenics, science to prevail. Pseudoscience, the motherland won't fail. Back in Moscow with specimens in tow. His hopes were high, but oh, did he know? The party's plan, hidden in shadow. It's our secret, so keep this on the low. Reimplant monkey balls to keep the union strong. Curing erectile dysfunction should not be wrong. Eternal youth, we Soviets do long, but we'll settle for a weaponized King Kong. Eugenics, oh what a plan. Forget morality, religion be damned. Eugenics, science to prevail. Pseudoscience, the motherland won't fail.
It feels really good to be productive, but a lot of the time it's easier said than done, especially when you need to make time to learn about productivity so you can actually, be productive. But you can start your morning off right and be ready to get stuff done in just a few minutes with the Inc. Productivity Tip of the Day podcast. New episodes drop every weekday, so listen and subscribe to Inc. Productivity Tip of the Day wherever you get your podcasts. That's Inc. Productivity Tip of the Day wherever you get your podcasts.